This is Ask Todd on the Financial Exchange Radio Network. If you have an existing estate plan or are in the market for one, Todd Lutsky is here to answer your questions and help you plan for later life. Ask Todd is presented by Cushing & Dolan, serving Massachusetts and New England for more than 35 years, helping families with estate and tax planning, Medicaid planning, and probate law. Visit CushingDolan.com. Now, here's Todd Lutsky.
And we are now joined by Mr. Todd Lutsky from the law firm of Cushing & Dolan. The segment is Ask Todd because you get to ask Todd your questions right now live on air. Studio line here is 888-205-2263. That's the number to call to ask Todd your estate planning questions. We got the phone lines open, so get all queued up in there. 888-205-2263 is the number for your chance to ask Todd your estate planning questions. One more time, 888-205-2263. Mr. Lutsky, how are you today?
I'm very well, thanks. And should I ask you how you're doing?
I'm okay. I've been a little better.
Yeah, what's going on?
Well, I've been doing some home improvement.
Yeah.
Was trying to put in some tile flooring, but I kept ending up with this really severe pain.
Yeah, what happened?
The doctor said I had grout.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah,
I've heard that happens to a lot of people.
Working on it. Todd, let's talk a little bit about a couple questions that I think come up fairly frequently when it comes to estate planning. The first question, I think, is let's say that someone actually goes and has an estate plan done for them. Drafted,
Sure.
Sign it, they do the whole thing. How does someone know if their trusts that they have created are actually funded? How can they tell if the money's in there, and how frequently do you see people who do an estate plan but don't fund their estate plan actually?
And I think I'm going to make that into two questions. One, yes, let's talk about how you know whether it's funded, and then two, we should probably say, what's the impact of not funding it?
Sure.
And was there a way?
Sure.
So let's run through those. Very valid points. One, when you do your planning and you've finished signing all the documents, as Chuck indicated, if you've done your planning, go pull it off the shelf and look at your real estate tax bill. See if the real estate tax bill comes in the name of the trust, meaning it might say, Chuck Zada, trustee of the Zada Family Trust. That's what you want it to say. Right? That's what you want to see. Now, you might not see all of that, but you might just see his name, with a trustee or TEE. You can assume the rest is probably accurate. Sometimes it doesn't all fit. Now, if you've recently done your plan, understand that the town, not the registry, but the town might take over a year to actually update its records, even though the new deed has been recorded at the registry right away when you signed it. So please don't get too upset if it's been recent. But that's one way to look at it. Another way to know whether or not your estate trusts have been funded, likely you would have wanted to transfer your brokerage account into the trust, or maybe your bank account into the trust. Take a look at the statements, provided you get those. If not, look at them online. They're still going to have the name listed as the owner on the account. Usually it's in the upper left-hand corner. That name, if it simply still says your name, like husband and wife jointly owned, well, then it's not in the trust. But again, if it's got your name as trustee of the trust, well, now you know it's in the trust. I mean, it seems like a simple thing to do, and it is, but that's how you know whether it's in there or not. Now, the problem is the impact. What if you don't do it? Have you wasted your estate planning dollars?
It would seem to me the answer is yes.
And I think you're right, Chuck, but I'm going to say it depends. It's going to say, yes, let's assume you're married, right? If you're married and you've done your estate plan, but you likely left everything the way you had it. Your home is owned jointly. Your IRA has a designated beneficiary, your spouse. You have a joint brokerage account. You have a joint bank account. Those are all normal things to do when you're a married couple. And if that's the way it's left, then you will have wasted your estate planning dollars. And I agree with you, Chuck. Why? Because one spouse dies, the survivor comes in and says, what do I do? And I look at all these accounts and assets and I say, wow, everything's just going to pass directly to you. Nothing is included in the estate of the first spouse to die. There is no tax due for you. Good news. And the spouse says, well, that was easy. And it is. Unfortunately, let's say the amount of the estate is $4 million, and now you, surviving spouse, are worth $4 million because everything passed under the marital deduction, which is the government's plan for all of us. And they are now happy when you die because you're worth $4 million. But here in Massachusetts, the estate tax exemption is only $1 million, and you have a tax liability that could have been used or eliminated if we didn't waste the first spouse to die's exemption by not funding the trust. So please fund the trust.
Talking with Todd Lutsky from the law firm of Cushing & Dolan. If you've got a question for Todd about your estate plan, this is the perfect opportunity to ask him. Live on air, the studio number is 888-205-2263. That is the number to call to ask Todd your questions about your estate plan. Live on air right now. Again, 888-205-2263. Still got room on the phone lines for you, so make sure that you get calling. We're going to take a quick break here, but when we come back, we are going to get to your questions. That phone number is 888-205-2263, so please get calling so you can ask Todd your question. That number one last time is 888-205-2263. Quick break, then your questions with Todd right after this.
Ask Todd with Todd Lutsky every Wednesday at 10:30, only here on the Financial Exchange Radio Network. You're listening to Ask Todd with Todd Lutsky on the Financial Exchange Radio Network.
All right, as promised, let's get right to your calls with Todd Lutsky. First up, we've got David in Western Massachusetts. David, what's your question for Todd?
Hey, good morning. It's a little far-fetched, but my mom, who's very elderly, has 2 properties, and I want to pick up on some tips to be on the lookout. You had mentioned the taxes and prior to the break. She has 2 properties, one her main home and then a second condo. Then there's a few trusts that are set up. Mm-hmm. And then ultimately I'm the power of attorney, I'm her healthcare proxy, all that stuff. But I'm not aware of how all this stuff really has been set up. And I'm trying to find out ways or what to look for as I kind of look over documents and this sort of thing. And when you're talking about the taxes and how to look at the tax bills, that kind of caught my ear. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking for more focused ways to assure that things are set up correctly, because my father, passed about 10 years ago, so she's a widow. And we haven't heard from this lawyer attorney in probably 10 years when my dad passed. So I'm trying to cross the T's and dot the I's and looking for some recommendations.
So let me ask you this. When your father died, did anyone do any estate planning, estate administration work after he died? Like, did you file an estate tax return? Did you do any file the will? Was there anything done?
In all honesty, there was a lawyer that had set up a lot of stuff with trust prior to his passing. And then all of a sudden the lawyer died. And so the new lawyer inherited this account, if you will.
So I'm just trying to find out, was anything done? Sounds like you don't know.
I don't. Yeah, and a big answer, yeah, I don't know. I have a lot of official paperwork, but in terms of filing what you just suggested, I have no idea.
So here's what you need to do. Yeah, this is going to be, you're going to have to do some digging. If you can't talk to your mom, I don't know what her capacity is or her situation, but, you need to go. The easiest thing to do if you can't figure it out on the real estate tax bill is simply go to the registry of deeds in the town in which the property exists, or the county in which the property exists, and pull up the deed. Have them, research that, pull up the deed, and take a look at it. And if the deed has the name of the trust on it, then you know it's in there. And that will be in the very first paragraph. The very top paragraph of the trust is called the funding paragraph, right? It says who owns it. You don't have to read the whole deed. You just need to read that first paragraph at the very top, and it'll have the name. Like if it just says her name or your mom and dad's name, well, then it was in their name. If, it'll say like probably who bought it, right? So-and-so sold it to your mom and dad. Your mom and dad own it as joint tenants. If that's what it says, that's how it's owned. If you see another deed that says mom and dad then transferred it to this trust, Well, now you know the trust owns it. And it'll be interesting to find out whether or not these two properties were owned by the trust that your dad set up before he died, which is critical from an estate tax planning standpoint, because that would help shelter the asset for future estate tax purposes going forward. So if it's in there, it might be sheltered. If it's not, your mom might just own it all now, and it'll all be taxed when she dies. So I think for you, it's kind of hard for me to answer all your questions here, but at least with regard to the real estate, do that and you'll find out how it's owned. And I think you're going to have to go get a copy of those documents. So call the old lawyer's office or wherever it got transferred to and see if you can track that down. So that would be the way to go there. So I hope that helps a little, but I know without sitting down and actually analyzing it all, I don't know. And check the bank accounts and see how those are owned. Folks, this is exactly why you need this guide, Avoiding the Estate Planning Potholes, because you just sometimes don't know what you don't know. And the guide will help you in that regard. So if you've never done your planning, this is a great guide to get before you do it. If you've done it, this is a great reason for you to figure out how and why you might need to change it. Like maybe it's been 10 years ago. Maybe you are relying on a nominee realty trust as your estate plan. Maybe you're relying on a will as your estate plan. The guide will explain why all of those are bad things to do and how to fix it. Maybe you now have a kid you want to protect from future divorces. Who knows? Take a look at the guide. It'll help you decide how to do your planning. 866-848-5699 or legalexchangeshow.com. Again, 866-848-5699 or legalexchangeshow.com.
Todd, I've got another one for you here. Let's go to Ruth in Massachusetts. Ruth, what is your question for Todd Lutsky?
Hello. I would like to know what you recommend are the best ways to do a life tenancy with the house in the names of your children. You said one you didn't agree with, but I think you said there were two more or three more that are okay, and I'd like to know what the choices are.
So when I think the question in general for everyone, if I could rephrase it, is when do I recommend a life estate arrangement as part of the estate plan? So I recommend it only 3 times. One, if your house has a mortgage on it and you want to transfer that house to, and again, I guess I should rephrase this. I never, carte blanche, this is an answer you don't get from a lot of lawyers. I will never transfer the property to the kids and reserve a life estate, which is what you, I think, Ruth, which is what you asked me about. And so one, I would never do that. Okay, so that's out. Just because I give up too much control. I can't sell it when I want. It's a capital. There's a gift tax that has occurred the moment I make a completed gift to my kids. It's subject to their creditors, their divorces. I just feel like I lose way too much control for what I gain, gaining only the ability to get a step up in basis for my children and ultimately protect it from the cost of nursing home care after 5 years. So there's some benefits, but to me, the negatives far outweigh the positives. Now, that said, do I do a life estate? Yes, 3 times. But the life estate I do, I convey the remainder interest to the irrevocable trust. So the remainder interest is not in the hands of the kids. It's in the hands of the irrevocable trust. And then I keep a life estate 3 times. 1, if there's a mortgage on the property and I'm trying to protect it, I'll do it that way because then I preserve the mortgage. They don't call the note. 2, if I'm worried about losing my, real estate tax abatement that I get. If you have that, I'm going to reserve a life estate. And 3, if it's a 2-family and it's being rented, rather than run the money through the trust, I'll keep a life estate so you can collect your income directly to yourself. Those are the 3 times I do it. Not a fan of the way it was described by Ruth.
Todd, thank you so much for joining us.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.